Welcome to our History channel. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, leave us a comment down below, and share this episode with a fellow history lover. And now, on to tonight's episode. January 18th, 1837. 18-year-old Abram Anglin rides towards the Trinity River with a group of close friends and fellow Texas Rangers. Though he is scarcely into his late teens, the young man finds himself deeply fatigued. Only months earlier, he had been amongst a small number of survivors of the devastating raid on Parker's Fort, in which the universally feared Comanche had brutally killed several settlers and carried off several of their children. The raid would make national headlines and go on to be remembered as one of the most seminal and most violent moments in Texas history. Several of the male inhabitants of the fort, Samuel Frost, Robert Frost, John Parker, Benjamin Parker, and Silas Parker, were killed. Anglin was amongst those who managed to escape, and has since settled in Fort Houston, near the present-day town of Palestine, Texas. In the short time since the incident, Anglin has struggled with traumatizing memories and an accompanying lack of restful sleep. Though the scene Anglin and his cohorts witnessed and survived was certainly stultifying in its brutality and callousness, it was not unique on the Texas frontier. Though the tales of the raid on Parker's Fort would quickly become the stuff of national folklore, the raid, and raids like it that were now besieging the newly immigrated Texans, was nothing new. For decades now, the native peoples who had long held dominion over northern, central, and western Texas had been experiencing similar raids, with many, like the Apache, Waco, and Tonkawa, being driven from their lands by the incessant riding of their long-hated enemies and the Comanche. Even the government of Mexico had grown so tired of the raiding upon their northerly settlements that they had agreed to allow Anglo settlers out of the area on the condition of their conversion to Catholicism, in order to act as a human buffer between Mexican settlements and the Comanche. Still, despite being all too aware of the danger involved, Abram England has refused to recoil from further confrontation with the Comanche, enlisting with the relatively new Ranger regiments which patrol the Texas frontier under the auspices of a Texas, curtailing the incessant violence and thievery from both Comanche raiding parties and outlaw bandits. Now, he and his fellow Rangers have been dispatched from Fort Sam Houston on an official mission. The young Rangers, David Falconberry, Evan Falconberry, Benjamin W. Douthat, James Hunter, and Columbus Anderson, now make their way through dangerous, hostile territory to the banks of the Trinity River, searching for the quarry that they have been dispatched to hunt down, a pack of local hogs who have wandered away from the fort and now have been missing for several days. The men are tasked with retrieving the errant animals, preferably alive, and returning them to the fort. Upon arriving, they scour the river bottom and soon find a number of the wayward swine. James Hunter and Benjamin Douthat volunteer to return the animals to the fort, while their comrades continue the search. They assure the men that they leave behind that, when they return the next day, they would be sure to bring one of the fort's canoes back with them, so that the party might cross to the western side of the Trinity River to continue their search. The Rangers who remain, England, the Falconberry brothers, and Columbus Anderson, continue their search on the eastern banks for a number of hours, before finally becoming so collectively bored that they decide to construct a makeshift raft in order to cross the Trinity. The men cross the river at a point which will later come to be the small settlement of Bonner's Ferry, and continue on their search, this time staying together in a group for the sake of safety and communication. They spend another few hours searching, this time finding no pigs. Now, fatigued and chilled to the bone from the incessant Texas north wind, the men decide to make their way to an overhang they had spotted upon first coming to the shore, in order to rest and warm themselves as best they can. While making their way to the overhang, however, The men are met with a disconcerting discovery. Embedded in the muddy banks of the river are several sets of moccasin-clad footprints. However, being cold, tired, hungry, and relatively sure that these were in fact tracks of the friendly Cherokee, who also frequented this crossing, the men decided to carry on to the shelter of the embankment, arriving thoroughly exhausted from their efforts in the biting cold. The men stretch themselves out on the ground and are soon fast asleep, within minutes of the last ranger drifting off into slumber. However, every man among them is awakened by piercing war cries to a blood-curdling sight. Bearing down upon them, and now scarcely 15 feet away from the overhang, are roughly 30 Comanche warriors, incensed at their presence and intent on killing them all. Before the rangers can fire upon them with their single-shot rifles, the Comanche let loose with a volley of their own, filling the air with bullets and arrows. David Falconberry is hit by a bullet in the initial volley and mortally wounded. Columbus Anderson is also hit twice, struck with 2 arrows in his neck. Still with adrenaline coursing through his veins, David Falconberry cries out, "Come on, boys, it's time to go." Falconberry and Anderson, both bleeding profusely, dive into the Trinity River, leaving grisly red streaks in the water as they swim to the opposite shore. Abram England has been wounded in the thigh, with a bullet having passed through his powder horn and causing shards of the implement to embed themselves in his thigh. Evan Falconberry has escaped serious injury in the first volley, but instead of diving into the river himself, has taken cover behind a cluster of trees near the embankment. Now, he finds himself caught off from the river by the attacking Comanche. Saying that he can be of no further immediate use to his comrade, Abram England now dives into the river himself, with arrows and bullets striking the water all around him as he swims. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, England finds himself on the eastern bank, opposite the attacking Comanche. Here, he finds David Falconberry, collapsed and bleeding profuse. Falconberry tells the teenage England to escape if he can and to hurry back with relief. This relief will not come, however, as David Falconberry is soon dead. England now sprints as fast as he can, running roughly 400 yards before meeting James Hunter, one of the rangers who had gone back to the fort earlier that day. Hunter pulls England onto the back of his horse, and the pair make a mad dash to return to the fort as the Comanches cross the river in pursuit. England only breathes a sigh of relief when they are finally ensconced within the relative safety of the fort. With his nervous system rattled to a near breaking point, the young ranger finally falls into a deep sleep inside the confines of one of the fort's rooms. Though his day is done, the grisly work of the rest of the rangers at Fort Houston carries on in the afternoon and evening. One ranger, Captain Haggard, now sends out a rescue party in hopes of finding any survivors. After the short ride from the fort to the Trinity River, the rescue party is greeted by an unsettlingly violent scene. Discovered first is the body of David Falconberry, who had urged Abram Angwin to leave him and go for help. Falconberry had apparently constructed a bed of grass and was found lying prone on it, only feet away from a small pool of water near the river. Next, the party finds the body of Columbus Anderson. Although lying prone, the ranger had managed to cover an astonishing 2 miles upstream after swimming across the Trinity River, all while bleeding profusely and with 2 Comanche arrows embedded in his neck. The rescue party then crosses the river and spends a considerable amount of time searching for any sign of Evan Falconberry. Much to their dismay, however, Evan Falconberry is never found nor heard from again. Though the rangers go to the extent of sounding the stream in search of his body, finding nothing, a Comanche account of the incident soon circulates the area, possibly shedding light on the missing ranger's ultimate fate. The account from the Comanche holds that Evan Falconberry had fired upon them and then put up a brutal, dogged resistance, fighting the Comanche tooth and nail, killing 2 warriors, and wounding a third as they hacked, stabbed, and shot at him from front, all directions. Finally, mortally wounded, and deciding not to leave his body to be mutilated by the Comanche, Falconberry had sprinted to the river, dove in, swam to the middle, and, amidst a swirl of blood, sank to the bottom, never to be seen again. In the brutal reality of the Texas frontier, this attack was nothing unique in its ferocity and inhumanity. The late 1830s would prove to be only the beginning of a decades-long war between the Comanches and the Texas Rangers. Both sides would find themselves victims and perpetrators alike of countless heinous acts, begotten by a seemingly perpetual cycle of violence and the conflict for ownership of Texas. For his part, Abram England would go on to join another ranger company only weeks later, in March of 1837, where he would serve for several more years. He would eventually marry and move to the town of Groesbeck, Texas, where he would pass away at the age of 58. At Fort Houston, reprimands were made by no less than the fort's namesake himself, President of Texas Sam Houston. Houston insisted that the attacks could have been wholly avoided had his instructions to construct a brick-and-mortar lodging on each side of the river and to establish an official ferry site at the crossing been followed. The official dispatch, reprimanding the official commander of the fort in one major jewel, reads as follows. The first orders for the erection of a blockhouse and a ferry boat on the Trinity River were issued 5 months since, and a part of this time, more than 100 men might have been employed for that purpose. The care advised by the President has been utterly disregarded, and owing to that alone is to be attributed to present melancholy accounts. You will perceive the necessity of preserving the most sleepless vigilance, and keep out guards under all circumstances, and never allow your enemy the slightest opportunity to catch you off guard. In the coming years, Texas would experience waves of violence that seldom had been seen in even the most conflict-ridden areas of the eastern United States. The ruthless combat on display at the Trinity River on this winter day in 1837 is but one example of countless encounters that would take place in the years to come. But the stories of those battles, shootouts, and in some cases outright massacres are, for tonight, other stories for other times. Thank you for joining us on this episode of History of the OK Corral. Be sure to click the like button, share this episode with a friend, and become a subscriber. Also, if you'd like to support our work and gain early access to episodes, as well as ad-free viewing, you can become a member of this channel by clicking on the Join button, or click the link in the description below to become a member on Patreon. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next time on History of the OK Corral, home of history's greatest shootouts and showdown.